Hi there, and welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with me, your host, David Charlton. And this is a bonus episode. Episode 312 is all set up to round off a recent 8-part series on the coach-athlete relationship. Over the last few episodes, I've explored different elements of mental toughness and how they shape coaching environments, relationships, communication, and performance. And today I wanted to add an extra layer to that conversation by speaking with a very special guest, Dr. John Perry. John is head of Department of PE and Sports Sciences at the University of Limerick. He's worked in academia and applied sports psychology for more than 2 decades, and he's seen as a big key figurehead behind the 4Cs model of mental toughness. In this conversation, we go well beyond theory and get into the practical realities of coaching and how coaches shape habits, agency, confidence, challenge, and commitment in the athletes that they work with every single day. So let's get into it. Hi, John. It's been a while now. Could you explain to the listeners and the viewers who you are and what you're all about? What got you into this field of sports psychology and mental toughness?
Absolutely, David. Yes, it's been a while. It's great to catch up. My name's John Perry. I'm currently the head of Department of PE and Sports Sciences in University of Limerick out here in the west of Ireland. I've been working in academia for the last 21 years now. But alongside that, I've always worked as a practitioner as well, be it a football coach, a small period of doing some performance analysis, and then largely in a psychology aspect. So over my career, what got me interested in sports psychology, like a lot of people, is I wanted to be a sportsman. I grew up in Grimsby, so I wanted to be a footballer. I wanted to play for Grimsby Town. We were good at the time, but unfortunately, I just wasn't very good. So that was never going to happen, and I had to figure out a plan B. So how could I be closer to football? Tried my hand at coaching, went to university, carried on doing stuff, ended up doing a bit of lecturing. It was a bit of performance analysis I was doing back in about 2004, 5, something like that, where the thing that really dawned on me was GPS was new at the time, which makes me sound quite old now. But I was spending ages just clicking on these dots and trying to interpret all this raft of data. And I thought, it's how you deliver the message that makes the difference here. That's the bit I'm really interested in. I could spend all these hours and produce all this data. And that's not to say that performance analysis isn't really important and really good. I put that caveat in there. But I felt like I could make a bigger impact in a shorter space of time in my interactions with the player. Now, maybe that means I'm just a better psychologist and I'm a crap analyst, but that's what really got me interested in sports psychology. I felt it was where I could make the biggest difference. And you'd hear people say, sports psychology, yeah, about getting those extra percentage gains. And I always thought, no, I don't believe that. I think sports psychology is massive and I can have a huge impact here. And then I became particularly interested in mental toughness. When I did a PhD, that was with Peter Clough, who would be very well known in mental toughness. But what really interested me about it was never this sense of just digging in when it gets hard or anything like that. It was people's relationship with stress. And I'd be in a dressing room before a game, 11 lads getting ready to go out on the field, all playing against the same opponent in the same game. The context is the same, having 11 completely different experiences. And some people looked like they were almost growing under the pressure, and other people felt like they were kind of shrinking and becoming less of themselves under the pressure, and then everything in between. So I became really interested then in the individual differences that explain why some people are reacting differently given the same context. And I think that's what brought me to spending, a lot of the last 15 to 20 years looking at this.
This is going to be fun. This is. I hadn't realised you were a former coach, come performance analyst there. So
Yeah.
Right. We're gonna try and help you rewind the clock a little bit, then also put your sports, well, your psychologist hat on in terms of when you're helping coaches deliver messages to players and various different athletes. So, as you alluded to, well, yeah, mental toughness is generally about, to a degree, about how people manage stress and how they manage pressure. Or, yeah, I think what I'm interested here in this podcast episode is, I suppose it's trying to get the creative juices of the athlete flowing and the emotional flexibility piece in all of this. So let's work with the different four C's. We'll think about the control aspect to start with. How can a psychologist help a coach, I guess, just develop the emotional control, the life control, help her then go on to help an athlete. So I guess, so the athlete goes from I can't do this to feeling like they've got an influence over their thoughts, their behaviors and emotions.
Yeah, and it's coaches that make the biggest difference here. Over my time working in elite sport in particular as a psych, I've definitely moved from spending more time with the players and athletes and more time with the coaches in a similar way to, I'll tell a story about my wife used to work in this pupil referral unit in Leeds, where kids would get kicked out of school and they'd go to this place and then try and get reintegrated. And she said the frustrating thing about it was that you only have them for a period of time. So whatever kind of habits you try and develop in that time, they go out the window when they go home, especially on a Friday. And that kind of always stuck with me because I think that's what we need to do as psychologists working within sport. The coaches will see them far more often. So it's not about any grand gesture, but it's about habits. So controllability is about sort of agency, feeling that stuff doesn't just happen to me, but I produce my own fortunes. You know, you make your own luck kind of analogy. And even simple questions like asking people to reflect on things. What did you do well there? What did we do well collectively? Where didn't we uphold the kind of behaviors and standards that we'd like to? Because you're not saying, hey guys, let's talk about control the controllables and all that kind of stuff that'll instantly get people rolling their eyes. But you're asking people to move from circumstance and this kind of philosophy of controllability and so on into behaviors and standards. So let's set clear standards on what is it we're trying to do and what kind of behaviors did we produce? Because we do have a sense of control over behaviors. Then from an emotional point of view, we can take that a step back and cognitive. So the journey I would go on with players and coaches is you don't necessarily control your primary cognitions and your primary emotional responses. Times we just have automatic thoughts. I don't know if you've ever heard of the call to the void. You just think of some mad stuff altogether. You know, like every time I walk past a drain, if I've got keys or phone in my hand, my head goes, imagine if I just drop that phone in that drain. Like, it doesn't mean I'm going to do it. It's just that's what your brain does. Helps me appreciate having ownership of my phone and my keys. So we can't control what thoughts and emotions we experience, but we do have some agency over how we appraise them and what we do between experiencing that thought and that emotion through to behavior. So when we're talking to athletes, let's ask them about behaviors. What behaviors did you perform there? What did you do well in a behavioral sense? What kind of behaviors did you produce that uphold the standards we'd set? Where did your behaviors fall short of the standards? Where did we collectively in our interactions meet our standards or fall below? So you're just reflecting on behaviors all the time, and it just becomes a habit that's what we do then. Whether things go well or not, we look straight at what we did. So it's creating that agency over stuff. And if I take that one step further, he's mentioned about kind of like creativity and emotional flexibility there. I think through practicing a sense of what standards look like and how behaviors produce those standards, you can start to raise aspirations. So I would ask an athlete, where do you want to get to? And they'll say, you know, what they think they can achieve. And then when we ask questions like, well, what does that require? What kind of behaviors does that require? What habits does that require? What standards that you can meet on a day-to-day basis does that require? Normally, the stuff they feed back to me is stuff that you think, well, you can do those things, right? So what does the level above that look like? You know, what kind of standards, behaviors, habits do people have? And they list them and you go, okay, so they seem controllable as well. So like you start then just to sort of nudge their standards up and you nudge their aspirations up as well, because they start to kind of remove that ceiling that they might have inadvertently placed on themselves.
Okay, I'm going to try and summarize this a little bit. So I heard the word reflect in there. So a coach is going to reflect back. Obviously, you talked about habits, standards, a couple other things. You mentioned questions. So asking damn good questions is a key skill for a coach there. And one other thing was all of the time you mentioned, because often, obviously, coaches can't ask questions all of the time. They've got to direct as well. But I think the key point is if you're meeting with your players, your athletes 2, 3, 4 times a week, then if you're only going to do it once every month, that isn't going to cut it. You've got to continually keep layering these messages.
Yeah, people become kind of allergic to an intervention, but they do respond to just an environment. So even something as simple as rather than asking what went well, what did you do well? Which sounds like the same question, but it's just a slight tweak in the wording is placing it within things that are within your agency. What did you do well means there's an assumption there that you brought about the circumstances. So you're straight into talking about things that you can control. So it's just getting into that habit of not what went well, because that could be I got lucky, or what didn't go well, the ref was crap. But what did you do well? Well, actually, the ref was crap, but I responded to it pretty well. It didn't affect me.
Do you think as well as an argument to say about the word success, you've touched on the fact you'd be trying to get a coach to ask an athlete about what success is to them in maybe a given match, a given situation. There's probably an argument as well for the coach to be asking themselves that question an awful lot, because very easy for a match at the weekend for a coach to go in with the mindset of, right, this is a must-win game essentially. But then that is not controllable, is it? So then they have to reframe that in their own heads.
Yeah, must-win game is one of those phrases that make you cringe when you hear it. So you go, so what happens if you don't? Yeah, whereas coaches being able to ask themselves, right, what do good behaviors look like from me? What do effective behaviors look like from me? And that doesn't even have to be at the weekend. This could be one practice drill within a session. You know, even reflecting on that. What does good coaching look like in this moment? And it looks like me intervening and coaching. So I have the control ability there. I can actually do that rather than I've set up the task. It's up to these guys to make the most of it, you know, which I know no coach is thinking of, but it is very easy just to kind of set up the practice, get it going, making sure that everyone's doing the things they should be doing and forgetting to coach and actually, you know, using that, saying that I have a lot of capacity to have an impact on how people finish this session, believing that they've got something from it.
I like that. Get my words out. In essence, you've got the emotional intelligence piece, haven't you, there, where the coach, it's important for them to place themselves in the shoes of the athlete and try and figure out, okay, I'm setting this drill up. How is player A, B, C, D going to feel about this? Some will be fearful, some will see it as a challenge, and so on. And then that's going to shape, I guess, the way they communicate with them, and then the final result as well on how the player feels at the end of it all.
Yeah, and even the way that you're intervening with stuff. So we'd have all like everyone who's done coaching qualifications will have probably come across like Socratic questioning or something like that. So you're stopping it and you don't want to just tell someone what you should have done, but you're like, what do you think you could have done there? And you're trying to open it up and stuff like that. But then it's easy to kind of do that when you're being assessed, when you're under pressure and there's time pressure. And your strength and conditioning coach is saying, we want to keep the intensity up because we want X amount of high speed running meters in this session and all those kind of things. It's so easy just to slip into just telling people because it's quicker and it keeps the momentum of the session going. But when we do that, we're taking away their agency. And ultimately, the higher the level you go in a lot of sports, decision making becomes the key determinant of success. Like taking football as an example, any professional footballer is good at passing the ball. I watch a lot of League Two football and players can spray the ball around the field and bring it down, no problem. But whether they see something early and make that decision, there's often a difference there between the levels. And that's the thing that you want players to be able to have agency on, like kind of making those decisions. You're not get these kind of like PlayStation coaches who sort of feel like they want to control everything a player does, as if like I'm going to move that way, pass there, do that, turn there, go square, drop back. Where's that player ever going to develop their own agency to take control of their performance?
So in that respect, do you think it's a useful skill for a coach to be labeling emotions, so bravery to fear, and I guess sharing their own vulnerabilities and the vulnerabilities of other maybe professional footballers out there? Will that harness creativity to a degree?
Yeah, and it's being able to recognize emotion without making it some kind of value judgment. So people talk about psychologically safe spaces and all those kind of things. Once we accept that emotions happen to us, we experience an emotion. Everyone experiences those emotions. It's not like someone saying, I'm going to go out there and choose to be fearful today. It just happens. What we can do, though, by recognizing it, and you're dead right, like having that vulnerability. When a coach says, imagine how you'd feel as a player if your coach says, right, lads, we're trying a different drill here. I've not actually done it like this. So I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit nervous as to how well it'll go, but I've planned well. I think as long as we can stay focused and stay on task and know what we're trying to do and keep that clarity, I think it's going to work well. I'd appreciate any feedback. That kind of modeling of saying, I recognize that I feel a bit nervous here, and that's fine, but I've done my work. I'm still confident that I can do it well. It normalizes people experiencing emotions.
I think that lends us on quite nicely to confidence. So you're going to get some coaches, a lot of coaches who are confident characters ultimately, and maybe they've played their sports at the highest level. I guess, yeah. What would you say to that confident coach when they're working with players, athletes around the delivery of feedback, and when you get you see some players who just shut down on occasions? How can they deal better with them?
Yeah. So my first line I use to those coaches is that they need to remember that they're not normal. And when I say that, if you take a normal distribution curve, right, most people who play a sport don't enter coaching professionally. So you're already an outlier if you do. The fact that you've gone into coaching where most don't means that you're probably pretty analytical, strategic, and you probably have more confidence than most do. And that recognition of, okay, most people don't have that kind of same experience that I do is really important. Because when we don't have that kind of self-awareness, we'll be thinking, well, why are you getting upset by that? It's just feedback. When I played, I got that all the time. People would tell me, it doesn't bother me. But like you need to recognize that they're upset because they're normal and you're not. You're an outlier. That's why you're in the position you're in. So I think that self-awareness is a really important point first. In terms of how confidence is affected by feedback, positive or negative, I think it's important to understand what we mean by confidence. We don't mean self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is situation-specific predictions of success. So you put a ball in front of me on a penalty spot right here, right now. To what extent do I believe I'll score? That's self-efficacy. It's not confidence. Confidence is more trait-like. It's a robust belief in one's abilities. So I give you an example that I often give. I have a lot of belief in my abilities that is not situation specific, or to be honest, even led by evidence. So when it comes to doing DIY around the house, I always think I can do everything. Like I see something done, I think, sure, how hard can that be? Other people can do it. I'm sure I can do it. And I have years of evidence that should probably lead me to think, no, you aren't very good at this. But still, my confidence in it is so robust that it just doesn't get knocked despite failures. I always just believe that I'm going to get there in the end. And it's that confidence that means I do get there in the end, even though I'm actually not very good at it. So that's what this kind of robust confidence is. So if I have that robust confidence, then if you give me negative feedback, I'm more likely to take that as information. I'm not internalizing that because I'm not placing my self-worth or confidence on what other people say. Or even, in my DIY example, it's not even based on the outcome. So, when people use phrases like, oh, confidence boosting win, I don't like that. I don't want a confidence boosting win. I don't want the outcome of a game to impact your confidence. I want your confidence to come from, I know that I have the skills to perform well. So I know that I'll keep going back to football because I've stuck with that. So if I have good ball control, good vision, I read patterns of play well, I pass the ball well, I'm quick. Whether I lose the game, those things, whether I get picked or dropped, I still think that I'm good on those because they're internally driven premises for my self-confidence. That's why we call it self-confidence, right? Because they're from myself. Having confidence that's affected by what someone says or an outcome. But by definition, that's not self-confidence. That's outsourcing your confidence to someone else. So when I'm a coach, honestly, I don't want to have that much impact on people's confidence. I don't want to be able to build up their confidence or knock their confidence because I want their confidence to be robust enough that it comes from their belief that they have the capacity for stuff. And I would ask every player what they're very good at doing.
Which I guess takes us back to what we were talking about before and the standards, the behaviours, the expectations, the habits, and so on, which are linked to the controllables essentially.
Yeah, it does. Like if what makes you a really good player is that you're quick, like if someone criticizes you, you're still as quick. Like it didn't make you slower. If you fail at something or you have a bad performance, you're still quick, right? If you build your whole game around saying these are the things I'm good at doing, and then the thing that coaches can do really well is let's build people's role clarity so they know what we're expecting them to do. And can we help that person to build their game around their strengths? So it's sometimes difficult. Let's say if you're second choice fullback and you get brought in for an injured first choice fullback, the worst thing is when the coaches want you to play the game that the other person would have played, when that might not be your game. Like you've got to be able to know as a player, here's what my game is, and it's built around my strengths. You don't need to have loads of strengths. You can have a game full of weaknesses. Sticking with my football example, let's take Lionel Messi, who is not very good in the air, is not particularly quick, is not particularly strong, has no right foot, can't track back, can't tackle, and he's one of the best players to have ever played the game because he has a game built around the stuff he's really good at. And I tell players all the time, like when you're in those moments, if you can't get on the ball for a while and you're starting to think, you're evaluating yourself, geez, I'm not playing well, I need to get in the game, I need to do this. Just go back to saying, what am I really good at? For the next 5 minutes, I just need to make sure I do the things I'm really good at. And I know I'm good at them. I wouldn't be in the team if I wasn't good at those things. So kind of that's where confidence comes from for me.
I had a good laugh there at your description of Messi. You made him sound like a League Two player for a moment.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, he's a very good player. He'd probably get on the bench for Grimsby, I'd say.
Maybe, apart from his positive self-talk and his positive visualization might change that somehow. Yeah. So I guess though that again, what I mentioned about positive self-talk and the visualization, a coach can likely help players in that respect as well, can't they? Where they actually have discussions and again ask questions about, what are you saying to yourself? And it doesn't necessarily have to be positive, but just again drawing awareness to the inner dialogue, and then how, I don't know, if somebody is we're going back to football, they are facing various different situations. What are they seeing, and what are they feeling in that moment is going to be a helpful piece.
Yeah, I think the thing with self-talk is it has to influence you on a cognitive, emotional, and behavioral level. So to use self-talk well, you have to think, well, what does that phrase feel like? What does it look like? So, for example, if I said I want to be alert for a game, and then if I go out there and say, I'll tell myself, come on, be alert, means nothing. But if I just spend a bit of time in training going, yeah, alert, what do I think about when I'm alert? Well, I'm kind of on the balls of my feet when I'm alert. I have my knees slightly bent. I've got my weight going forward. I have a little bit of a spring. I'm ready to go. Vision wise, I feel like I'm really tuned in. It's like I'm watching it in 4K. I've got laser like vision. That's what alert looks like. I'm ready. I can't wait to see that opportunity so I can go for it. So you kind of work through, that's what being alert looks like and feels like. And then comes Saturday and I'm in the game and I feel myself attention just drifting a bit. I'm like, come on, like, be alert. It means something. And I can automatically feel my body language changing and my visual scanning changing as a result of it. So there's a world of difference between saying, well, let's do this self-talk and actually kind of embodying that self-talk. And you don't have to be a psychologist to do that. A coach is well able to say, well, what does that look like? What does that feel like?
Yeah. I guess the key for the coach is recognizing that everybody's inner experience is different. So I'll use brave as an example. You might come up with a metaphor like a lion, and a lion to somebody might mean brave, and they're going to go crunching into a tackle if it was rugby or football. But a lion to somebody else, they might be frightened of a lion. So
Yeah.
it conjures up a completely different experience.
Yeah, I'd be thinking of the lions, slumbering out, because anytime you go to a safari park or whatever, they're always just fast asleep, aren't they? That's my only experience of them. But yeah, you're dead right. It's drawing out kind of what does that mean to you? How does that make you feel? How does that change your body language? How do you embody something? How does that change your sense of kind of mental intensity in that moment? Do you feel like really kind of locked into something when you do it? And it's finding what's going to work for that person. The words could almost be made up. Like, the word itself is just a noise, but it's what you attach as an individual to that. And yeah, we absolutely can't assume that what I attach to it is what someone else is going to attach to it. And you can learn a lot about someone by asking them. Like, a question I like to ask is like, how are you going to be? Like, if it's, say, players are doing a bit of activation before a game or something, just say, how do you want to be out there today? Like, how do you want to be? And then like, yeah, I want to be like this. I want to be like that. And they start describing things that you can learn a lot about what that person's intensity is like when they feel that they're at their best. We can't assume that's going to be the same as what we would want it to be.
In some ways, I think what you're tapping into solution focused therapy there to a degree, where you're talking about at your best. And yeah, I guess it's a little bit of advice for coaches there. Look that up and
Absolutely.
utilize some of the questions from solution focused therapy. It can only help. Okay, let's move on to the challenge aspect then. Again, how can we as psychologists help coaches design environments which are going to develop learning essentially and cast fear to one side?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting one, because if you read up stuff on, say, motivational climate, for example, there's a lot of like theoretically very good stuff on there, in that we want environments that reward people sort of taking risks and effort and not being drawn into intra-team rivalries where they're kind of trying to compete with or comparing themselves to people around them. We're not rewarding outcomes, but we're rewarding processes and all that kind of stuff. So there's some really good stuff out there. But I think sometimes the message gets a bit lost, because it can come across as, oh, it's about learning and reflecting, almost like it's a bit soft. And it's absolutely not. So there's a great clip that has done the rounds on social media for a few years now of Pep Guardiola being really angry with someone in training because he doesn't come looking for the ball in a tight situation. So by not coming into that difficult situation to try and receive the ball, he's left a teammate isolated with no options. Now, it might not have been a great option, and there might be a high risk that if he received the ball there, he might lose it, but at least it's an option. And the thing that Guardiola's really annoyed about is that that person was avoiding responsibility. And that's a great example of how you maintain a high standard on taking responsibility for stuff. But that only works if, when that player does that and makes a mistake, you recognize that they took responsibility and you say, brilliant, well done. Like, it didn't work out this time, but you took the responsibility we wanted you to take. You put yourself in that position. You didn't choose an easy option. If we fail to praise when people have taken those harder options, or even worse, if we start criticizing mistakes that people have made, and in that clip, Guardiola makes a big point of saying, I'll never criticize people for making mistakes, then we kind of lose that trust. And this is where I think, ironically, what happens in these old school versions of what a high performance environment was like was a sense of not allowing mistakes. And when you don't allow mistakes, what happens is we start to just take it a bit easy because we don't want to screw up. So we actually start to lower our standards. Whereas a situation where you say, we set the highest possible standard and we expect mistakes, and you'll be praised for choosing the right option, the brave option, even if it leads to a mistake. Like, that's how you maintain standards. Like, you're aiming for something that you probably are going to fail at. I'll give an example from I was working with it was a hurling team recently here in Ireland, but it happens in a lot of ball sports where they're just doing this simple little drill where they move one way, turn, hit the ball back to someone who has to run on and catch it. Just like almost like a warm-up, really. And what I noticed was you would see some players who are shortening their stride to make sure that they catch the ball cleanly, because they don't want to be the person that drops it and then the drill falls down while they have to pick it up and go again. And I'm looking at that thinking, you should be dropping this. I want to see 10 to 20% of these hit the floor, because if the point of training is to get better means that you've got to try and do something that's beyond your current consistent capabilities. So you should be making mistakes reasonably regularly. I don't want someone to make mistakes all the time, but I want someone to try and learn to catch that ball at absolute full tilt, because that's the thing that's going to make the difference come the weekend. If you start taking it a bit easy, just shortening your stride a little to make sure you catch it, even if you do, someone's going to be right on top of you. Whereas if you can go flat out, knowing that 9 times out of 10, I'm still going to catch that, that's how I get separation from the person who's marking me. And that's how I can actually affect the game. So I've got to park that ego. Don't worry if I'm the one who drops it and messes up and people groan, and go like, I'm trying to get better here. I'm trying to do this at a level that is beyond what I can currently consistently do.
I guess you've got to then, as a coach, understand where people are in different drills, different, like, I suppose, are different skills there, because what you don't want to do is get drawn into challenging them too much, and then with your language, criticizing, comparing, using sarcastic language, all of that sort of stuff. You really, you need to sensibly challenge, get away from the, like, don't do language, to try and to direct them as to what it is you're trying to achieve.
I actually had a coach before who was setting up this drill that they did so often, and the coach was saying, I don't want to see any mistakes now. And I was talking to the coach after, saying, I know what you're trying to do here is set a really high standard. Like, that's an admirable thing to do. But I also think what you're doing is reducing the standard, because when people are focusing on not making mistakes, they start performing a task within themselves. So there's this kind of slight paradox. When we want to raise standards, we've got to permit mistakes. And if you're going to permit mistakes, the thing is, this sort of stuff's easy to say. When the pressure's on, he maybe hasn't won in a couple of matches or something like that, you have to follow through on it. You can't give a big speech, in pre-season about how this is our philosophy, this is what we're taking to training and pushing it, and I want to see people pushing themselves and pushing their boundaries and making mistakes. You'll be supported and everything. If when the pressure gets on, you start groaning or rolling your eyes or even just being quiet, because sometimes not saying anything when someone makes a mistake means that player will start to internalize. It's only natural. If you make a mistake in training, you're thinking, who saw it? And then it's just inevitable that you're going to start thinking, what are they thinking now? Especially if they're picking the team in the next couple of days. So it's so easy as a coach to just not want to make a big thing of it, so you don't say anything. But actually, you're probably better off saying, if you don't think they were particularly pushing themselves, you could just ask what happened there, and that's fine. But if you do think they are pushing themselves, you can give them, don't worry about that, fair play. You're pushing yourself. You're trying to go beyond the current ceiling, which is great to see. You gotta follow through.
And again, that awareness of the person you're dealing with. Some people I suppose, don't want to be called out, do they, in front of the group, really on a one-to-one basis. They would prefer some of these conversations. So, yeah, looking at the individual's personality and needs in that respect is important.
Yeah, and look, that depends on, in an ideal world, you want to have a culture where it's kind of safe enough that people don't feel threatened being called out for things. And there's a lot of things you can do on a consistent basis over a long period of time to establish that kind of culture. But creating cultures is hard, and people bring their own personal baggage. So you might have a culture even within a team, but somebody else joining might not experience that and might not have the same kind of response, because teams, and they're not static. And so it's certainly something you always have to be aware of.
Yeah, it's complicated when you've got a big mix of people and support staff and all the rest of it as well. Got to try and make sure your messages are all as aligned as possible. Very difficult one. Right. Okay. Last thing, I'm aware of time. We haven't touched on commitment yet. So, what advice would you offer coaches in terms of supporting athletes, supporting the development of committed athletes?
Yeah, I think commitment is probably, in sports environments, one of the most misunderstood topics there is. Commitment is not about motivation, discipline, effort, respect, pride. It's cognition. It's attentional control, essentially. So what we sometimes see people being criticized as being lazy or lacking desire or not wanting it enough is actually that they're probably just pointing their attention in the wrong place. You don't get to be in a high performing athlete without being motivated, unless you're freakishly talented. So let's take, for example, when a player doesn't track back, they don't follow someone and mark them. Interestingly, that always gets criticized way more than when a player doesn't make a forward run, even though it's the same amount of energy to run forwards as it is to run back. And attacking is as part of the game as defending. It's just that sometimes we seem to put this value label on. You're almost helping your team by defending, but not helping them by attacking. But anyway, often if somebody doesn't track their opponent back, they're sort of accused of being lazy, and it never is. It's always a cognitive error, not a motivational one. It's that they just haven't seen something, they haven't spotted it, their attention has drifted, and they haven't seen what's happening. It can be resolved as well through better communication. So I do work with teams there where give a name and an instruction, and you see players just shouting the same name, if you're ahead of me, David, David, David. And by this point, you're just looking around, whereas I could have just said David left shoulder, and you know where you're going straight away. So we can improve it with that. And also, I think as long as you can have an understanding throughout the team that when people make a commitment error, it's a cognitive error. It's normal. So let's say when you're fatigued, physically, mentally, emotionally, the normal human response is to take it easy. So we've evolved to survive. We haven't evolved to track a runner in case he kicks a ball into an area of a field and someone else kicks it into a net, or to chase someone so we can catch a ball, or to do whatever we're trying to do in sport. We didn't evolve to play sport. We evolved to survive. So when you're fatigued, the absolute normal human response that your brain will do will say, save your energy. For all I know, there's a tiger around the corner about to chase us, so we need to reserve our energy. So what you're trying to do is not a normal response. You're saying, no, I'm going to expend the last bits of my energy to chase a ball around a bit of grass. That's not normal. And I think once we can reframe it and understand that what we're trying to do is not normal human behavior, we can move commitment away from being like a test of character and recognize it as more of a cognitive skill. That actually a normal human response is we lose concentration, we conserve energy, we switch off, we get distracted. So now I haven't got time to articulate that fully during a high speed game. So I might say it in perhaps not the nicest terms, but as long as you can interpret that message as what I'm actually saying there is, I understand what you've done is a completely normal human response, but I need you to switch your attention to where it should be and do that better. So I think it would love it if we could all get much better at stopping to treat commitment as this kind of test of character and just recognizing it for what it is, which is a cognitive skill encompassing attentional control.
Yeah, I'm just thinking on that score. So, for argument's sake, you talked about a player, a footballer there, not tracking back or going forward. It might be that cognitively up here, I don't know, they've had something going on at home and there's something on their mind, or that their coach might have given them too many instructions, so they're sort of second guessing a lot, and there's so much can be going on. A little bit like the committed athlete in the gym who maybe only gives 70%. Maybe again, it's because they're not actually enjoying the workout, or it hasn't been explained properly to them. Yeah, it's complex, isn't it? There can be so many factors.
Yeah, that athlete in the gym who, maybe stops a couple of reps short rather than pushing themselves, that's because of the way they're interpreting their feedback that they're getting. So they're receiving a bit of feedback to say, I don't think you can do any more here. You might get injured or something like that. So there's normally a logic as to why they're doing that. They're not going, I can't be bothered to do these last 2 reps. I think I'll just leave it. I don't know any athletes that think like that. So it's just recognizing it as it's an error in a cognitive term. Sometimes it's a very logical error. Sometimes it's just a simple distraction error. We're not made to be completely focused all the time. It drifts. We move. It's completely normal. So we just need to get better at developing it. And if we're going to do that, we need to create the kind of culture that means I can recognize where somebody has made one of those errors without it feeling like a personal attack, because I'm not criticizing this person's desire. Even I would take it to some level. I always get pushback on this, but when people are late for stuff. So generally, people who score lower in commitment are often poor at perceiving time. And it's just the way people's brains work. We all perceive time differently. So to be on time, you have to make a judgment of how long a series of different tasks are going to take. And if you're bad at perceiving time, you'll misjudge each of those. And then all of a sudden you're in a rush and you're late and you've absolutely busted gut to try and get there and you're a couple of minutes late. And then somebody thinks you're not being committed, as if it's disrespectful, probably because their brain works in a completely different way where they perceive time either very accurately or just as inaccurately, but the other way. They always think things are going to take longer than they do. So they end up getting somewhere early and going, I've got more time than I thought I would have. So they think that's easy to be on time and they find it disrespectful when somebody else doesn't. And I liken it to a sightedness, like vision. Like some people are short-sighted, some are long-sighted, some have got 20/20 vision. We wouldn't criticize someone for not being able to see objects that are close to them. Like, come on, that's just disrespectful. Try looking harder. So we make these errors all the time. We assume that everyone's got a brain like I have. Therefore, I expect the same standards. And like I say, coaches tend to have brains that are quite different to most athletes because most athletes don't become coaches.
So ultimately recognizing our own biases and our value system is going to be different to athletes, and every individual is going to be a key there. Okay, right. We'll look to wrap up.
Yeah.
Can you summarize this lovely conversation with 3 key takeaways for the coaches?
Yeah. Well, I guess if I do 4, because we've got the 4 C's. Okay. So if we think about control as being agency, it's trying to give athletes a sense that they have the agency, they have the capacity to bring about their fortunes. If we think of confidence in terms of stability and robustness, developing genuine confidence is not outsourced, but it's confidence that comes from within. That's not going to get knocked by one or two things going for or against someone. Think of challenge as growth. And if you want to grow, you've got to try and do something that's beyond your current levels of capability. And that can be quite daunting. So you need a lot of support, and we need consistency in how well we're recognizing people who are pushing themselves beyond their comfort zone. And we think of commitment as a cognitive skill about being able to sustain focus, and we get rid of these kind of value judgments.
Nice way to finish that is.
Lovely. I could have just said that at the
summarizes
start.
it. Nice 10-second podcast.
Yeah.
I know. I really appreciate your time, John, today. It's been fascinating talking through all of the various different concepts there and ideas. It's been good fun and great to catch up again. Can you signpost the listeners and the viewers to whether it's social media or your email? Where can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm pretty shocking on social media, so I'd probably steer clear of that. But if anyone wants to email me about anything, you're more than welcome to. john.l.perry@ul.ie, or sure, just Google me. I'm sure I'll come up on my email address will come up there in Limerick and stuff. So more than happy to receive any correspondence from people. And yeah, thanks, David. Always a pleasure.
No, thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic. Well, that was a fascinating conversation with John. He's of great value as always, and there's so many nuggets in there. But for me, a few things did stand out. It should come from a robust belief in your strengths, in your role, in your daily habits, and what it is that you bring to the table. In other words, confidence should be built from the inside out, from the ground up. And another really valuable theme was around challenge and mistakes. If we want athletes to grow, we've got to let them stretch beyond what they can currently do consistently. And that means mistakes are going to happen. It's a fact of life. So if a coach says that they want bravery, responsibility, and growth, but then criticizes every mistake, they're going to create hesitation, not development. And finally, I thought John's take on commitment was excellent. Too often in sport, we treat lapses in concentration, tracking back, effort in the gym, or missed details as character flaws. But many of these moments are actually better understood as cognitive errors. Attention drifts, fatigue kicks in, cognitive overload occurs, poor communication happens, or misunderstandings. That shift in perspective can help coaches respond with a lot more intelligence and empathy. Ultimately, this conversation brings us back to one word that runs through the whole series: self-awareness. So self-awareness in coaches, self-awareness in athletes, and self-awareness in the relationship between the two. And if we're honest, when coaches understand themselves better, they communicate better. When athletes understand themselves better, they make smarter decisions and they perform and learn better. And when both understand each other better, the relationship becomes far more powerful. So I hope this bonus episode has added an extra layer to the series and given you plenty to reflect on and challenge some ideas and assumptions that you've got. And to finish with here, I've got a challenge for coaches. Over the next week or weeks, could you pay close attention to your language, to the biases that you have and your assumptions? When an athlete makes a mistake, loses focus, shuts down after feedback, or doesn't do what you expected, could you pause before judging? Could you ask yourself, am I interpreting this as poor attitude, lack of effort, or lack of character? When actually it might be about confidence, it might be about cognition, about fear, about overload, misunderstanding, or it actually could be that they're a product of the environment that I've created here. And then there's a second question. What could I say, or what could I do right now that's going to give this athlete more agency, more clarity, and more room to grow? So I hope this challenge is helpful, and I hope this episode and this series has challenged your thinking as a coach. We're going to be taking a short break now in the podcast as I get my thinking cap on, conduct some solo episodes and some interviews, and create another series which is going to help create some positive behaviour changes. Until early May, take care, look after yourself, and have a great time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.